5:30, let's go ahead and get this show started. The first item on our agenda is to consider approval of minutes for August 30, 2023. Commissioners?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor of approving the minutes for August 2023, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Moving on. Public hearing, case number PD 2023-002. Applicant Ben Sanchez with Park Hill, representing Stephenville ISD, is requesting a rezone of property located at Wolf Nursery Road, parcel R64240, being block 156, lot 7, PTOF of the acres 42.930 S2600, City Edition of the City of Stephenville, Erath County, Texas, from CTS City Tarleton School to PD Plan Development. The applicant will present the development plan. Steve.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Can everyone hear me? A lot of times I'm told I mumble too much, so I just want to make sure everyone can hear me. So thank y'all all for being here tonight. We have Park Hill and members of the Stephenville ISD here with us tonight to present this case. Dr. Cedarson is here. We have Park Hill representatives. And then later, our city manager may want to add some comments to this case as well. On August 16, 2023, a conceptual plan was presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission. The applicant is now requesting a rezone and approval of development plan. At that conceptual hearing, we received quite a bit of feedback from the public, and those comments were received by Park Hill representatives, and Mr. Sanchez has made sure that he has incorporated that into his submittal. He has, at my request, this a little bit different approach, but I have asked that Mr. Sanchez provide a presentation to the commission regarding his PD request, and he has that for us tonight. And Mr. Sanchez, Madam Chair, may thank you.
So Ben Sanchez with Park Hill. Madam Chair and Commissioners, thank you for allowing us to come back. We're excited to be back, actually. It's been about a month or so, and we're excited to be back now. We've gone through the design process. We submitted some documents today to Steve's office for the site portion of the stadium, not the actual stadium yet. That's still in design. And if you go to the next slide, please. I wanted to pause a little bit and just kind of share with you about Park Hill and what our just what our mission and vision is, because we're definitely invested in this community through our design and through being open to feedback from yourselves and also from the public. And to incorporate that feedback into our designs. We definitely are all about building community and just inspiring the community and the people that are going to be using the stadium as well. And you can see our values here as well. I want to delve here a little bit onto enduring relationships. Definitely appreciate Steve and the staff and city manager as well, allowing us to come in and working with us and partnering with us to actually work on this stadium. So I wanted to just share a little context about who Park Hill is, and that we take our job seriously, and we definitely take your community and want to impact it in a positive way. I'm going to give the floor now to Landon. He's going to go ahead and walk us through the design. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners and Madam Chair. Thanks again for having us. Quick agenda is we're going to do a project overview, and then we're going to go over our requested code deviations, and then lastly our schedule. So touching back again, I wanted to just give an overview of the site and the different constraints and opportunities that we had to work with. It's at the corner of North Wolf Nursery Road and West Frey Street, as you're aware. It is just north of the junior high to the south, and there is an existing channel that bisects the site, there in blue shown. There's also a FEMA floodway shown in the blue, cutting down the eastern third of the site. And then the last constraint for the site was the potential waters of the U.S., which is delineated there in yellow. And then in red, we've got the zoning required building setback shown. So that's how informed our site. Our site informed the design of the stadium. That channel Because of the channel, we knew that we had to stay on the south side of the channel, and also because of the FEMA floodway, we knew that we needed to stay to the west of the floodway. So in that bottom two-thirds quadrant of the site is where we have to work with. First off, we knew that the stadium needed to orient to a true north rotation for optimal solar conditions. And then secondly, we knew that we needed to favor the home side parking versus over the visitor side. So as you can see, home side is on the west, home side parking is there on the west, visitor side parking is there on the east. Now from a driveway standpoint, we've aligned the two driveways that have cut-throughs in the medians there on West Frey Street. You can see those connections there. On North Wolf Nursery Road, we have that ceremonial entry drive, double drive there. It's aligned on our press box, which will be a really monumental entry experience. And then we have additional parking there north of the ceremonial drive. You can kind of see the drainage channel. We've straightened that drainage channel. The main reason we've straightened it is to claim as much of our site for building purposes as possible. And later on in the presentation, Ben's going to speak to the drainage aspects of, you're seeing that velocity dissipation pond. He'll explain that. He'll explain the detention pond and how he came up with that, with those specific layouts. So let's go to the next slide here and talk about the stadium in general. I wanted to give y'all a couple perspective views to really show the relationships that these buildings have to the stadium. Now there's 4 buildings that we're proposing for the project. On the very north or the left side of your screen, you're seeing the locker room building. The locker room building is on the north side of the stadium. The locker room building is flush with the field and also flush with the adjacent fire lane. There's a bus drop-off you can kind of see right next to the locker room. So that'll be for our team players and cheerleaders that come in to get dropped off there. Then on the west side, of course, is the home side concourse, the home side press box, our grandstands, and we've got a lower bowl on the home side. There to the south, you see band restrooms. We've got a separate grandstand for our band members, 200 seats there to the south. And right behind it, we've got a restroom that's designated just for band members only. And we did not need the restroom to meet our restroom count. It's more about convenience for the band being separated from the rest of the stadium. There to the east, you can see our visitors concourse. The grandstands for the visitors side are fully elevated. Everything's flush with grade. So it's a flush entry concourse on the east. And then one last thing to point out on the home side is that when you come in the concourse, you're going to be elevated 12 feet above the field. So you're going to have a really good view down into the field right whenever you enter the concourse. And so all of our ADA seating will be at that accessible level, so there won't be ramps and steps to navigate to the ADA seating. So this just rotates it again. I've already walked through each of the buildings here, but it gives you a different view. I wanted to give y'all some context on the home side. That's really where the bread and butter of the stadium is. You can kind of see in green highlighted there, it says concourse, and you can project that section, you can project it over to the elevation of the grandstands, and you can kind of see how you're entering in from the parking lot and you're already up 12 feet above the field. So you can kind of see what that experience would look like on the concourse level. And then in yellow there, it says first level terrace. That is a terrace that you can kind of see the middle square there at the top. That terrace is actually only accessible from the grandstands. So as you're walking up the grandstands, you can use that first level terrace, kind of like a VIP type of area. And then the rooftop, of course, it would be a VIP access, and it's got kind of a shade covering up at the top, and would really have excellent views down to the stadium. So really, we're providing a true breadth of use for, viewing across and viewing at many different angles with the height of that grandstand and building. Looking down at the field, I wanted to give you all a shot of what that would look like as a player, kind of looking back on it. You can kind of, again, you can you can visually kind of see that mass of the 12 feet from field level to home concourse. And then you can kind of see how all that circulation, while the grandstands are cascading above you, there is full pedestrian circulation, as you can kind of see underneath. So that concourse, from the building to the edge of the bowl, there's going to be full circulation. So a lot of great usable area. Here's a couple elevations from each side. The building, this is the specific materials have not been picked out, but the general feel has, and the percentages may change, but we're using split face CMU, metal panel, a concrete type panel, and then corrugated perforated panels. And then underneath the grandstands, we have a vinyl panel as well. This just shows, this is more our band side. You can kind of see the small restroom building, top left image there. And go back one please. Yeah, the visitor side elevation. You can see underneath the grandstands, we've got concessions, we've got restrooms for the visitors, and we've also got kind of a storage building there in that building. Okay, so parking is something special to this PD, and so we wanted to have a special slide just to talk about this. You can see in phase one, we're planning to build all of the parking south of the drainage channel. So all the parking and drives that is either a dark gray shade or a light gray shade is what we're planning to propose in phase one to be constructed now. So the total parking spaces shown on site for phase one, total is, excuse me, is 1,218 spaces. We realize that that does not come close to our 4-to-1 requirements for our seating. And so one of the code deviations that all the code deviations we're gonna talk about at the end of the presentation, but just in reference, you can see the 2 yellow dashed arrows. Those are our pedestrian crosswalks. We're proposing to use the junior high parking lot, the 468 parking spaces to the south. We're gonna put signalized pedestrian crossings across West Fray at those 2 locations to be able to get the users across. So specifically for phase one, everything that you see in gray or light gray or dark gray, and that's 1,218 seats. In phase two, which we'll talk about as a code deviation, we've got some stipulations for when that would come online. That's the magenta in the top left. Phase two has 239 parking spaces, and we'll talk about some stipulations for when that would come into play. I'm going to pass it off to Ben to speak to drainage.
Thanks, Landon. So as you can see here, like Landon said, we've realigned the channel from its current alignment going to the southeast, again to maximize the usable space here. The channel is going to be armored or lined with Gabion mattresses that are stone-filled baskets. That serves 2 purposes: erosion control for the channel side slopes, but also to slow down the water. We have a high amount of water coming from off-site going through through our site, and so we have to capture the water in the channel, make sure it stays in the channel, and also slow it down. So we were not able to slow it down enough just with the Gabion mattresses, so we incorporated a velocity stilling pond, as you can see here in this image, which is going to allow us to capture the water, slow it down, and then release it at a normal rate, or the pre-development rate that was being released with the actual previous old channel there as well. So that's the main function of that velocity dissipation pond. The main pond for the stadium, the way we size that is we take the pre-development area of the stadium that before was pervious ground cover and soil. And then we run another calculation now because we're 100% now pervious mostly, and we compare the outflow, the water that creates between the pre-development condition and the post-development condition. And through our analysis, we then determine the size of the pond that's going to have to capture the amount of water that we're producing actually. Generating with the impervious material, and we're going to hold the water in that pond and let it out slowly through a pipe. For those large rain events, we have an overflow weir on top above the pipe that's going to also allow the water to exit the pond. Again, we are meeting the pre-development rates for the site. So we're not increasing the actual rate that those culverts at Frey Street right now are seeing. And through our analysis as well, we're actually decreasing the amount of water that those culverts are going to see through our analysis and through what we're doing on site as well. So we're going to be helping the condition downstream a bit because of just reducing the amount of flow that's going to go through those culverts. The analysis right now is being reviewed, I think, by the city's consultant. So we haven't received any feedback yet from them. But as soon as we do, of course, we'll take their comments, we'll address their comments, probably meet with them to make sure that our analysis are accurate. Again, but in all indications right now is we're actually reducing the flow that those culverts are going to see in the future. Happy to answer any questions about drainage right now, or we can go on to the next slide if you like.
Oh, let's save that for when I open a public hearing.
I'm sorry, I meant the commissioners. This slide here just gives you an illustration of what I just described. The left top left slide there is the actual depth of flooding in the proposed condition. Essentially, what the water is going to do in a 100-year storm. Okay, the one on the right is what the water is doing now. It's you see a lot of blue. That's where it's standing. It's mainly in the channel. But as you can see, there's a parallel channel just above the current channel that is actually carrying water right now. That our analysis really revealed to us. When we then go to the other slide there, after we build all the site work, we regrade everything. We build the 2 ponds. We build the channel. As you can see, all the standing water that we're seeing on the right slide is now kind of had disappeared and gotten into the channel. It's being held by the ponds. Right to the south of the channel, you see a conglomeration of blue there. That's water that would stand in the parking lot. We have no way of modeling that in our software. So what we've done there is we're going to have inlets that are going to capture all the water and it's going to pipe it underground to the stadium detention pond. So the parking lot is going to be dry, even in the 100-year condition. We're estimating it's going to be dry. The bottom slide there, as you can see, the existing flow rate through the existing channel is about 2,000 cubic feet per second. Now that's all off-site flow. Okay, that's not the flow that's being generated on site. That's all coming from the north and west. That's going through the channel, through those culverts on Wolf Nursery Road. The smaller light blue line is the actual flow rate after we build all the infrastructure. So as you can see, if we're going from 2,000 cubic feet per second down to about 1,600, 1,700 feet per second, that's a pretty big reduction in flow that the culverts at Frey Street are not going to see, which is, I think is going to help the downstream condition. Now, our job was to analyze our site, okay, and also the off-site coming through the channel. So the downstream condition was not part of our analysis, but as you can see here, we've taken that into account, and by that reduction, we are definitely going to be helping the downstream condition as well, okay? And I'm going to give back to Landon now, who's going to continue with the presentation.
So last month, we heard concerns about fencing up against the Britton Circle development. And what we have in our design is that along the Britton Circle property line, we've got a 6-foot high chain link fence. There will be a landscape buffer in front of that, and I'll talk about that on a future slide coming up. So we've got a 6-foot chain link fence along the Britton Circle, and that's the magenta pink line up at the top. And then, or excuse me, the red line. Around the stadium, we've got an 8-foot tall ornamental fence that we're going from building point to building point and enclosing the stadium on the inside of the fire lane. So that's our current plan. Some typical representative photos of what those two types of fencing materials look like. Okay, so now for landscaping. So y'all are aware that the site is heavily wooded for the channel portion as well as the eastern portion. The current landscape code allows for credits if you keep existing trees that meet certain requirements. So Stephenville ISD hired a surveyor to tag over 400 trees that we felt like would be outside of our developed area, meaning outside of where we're moving dirt and would be removing trees, so that we would have a realistic idea of how many trees we're keeping and what size and how would that actually equate to the landscape requirement. So this little image to the left is really showing, that's not the total trees on the site, but that's showing the over 400 trees that the surveyor picked up, and I'll show you how those calculations play out on the next slide. So first things first, I wanted to give an overview of the design for the landscape. So there to the right, you can see the existing trees to remain that we're anticipating keeping. You can see around the stadium, the typical treatments are irrigated sod grass. The islands will have a stabilized decomposed granite for ease of maintenance. The trees that were required by the landscape ordinance, we wanted to really make a difference with those, make them tangible assets for the site. And so how we did that was that Grand Promenade drive entry, the ceremonial drive there to the west, that's tree line, 30 feet on center, both sides, so it's going to have a really great feel whenever you're driving in off of Wolf Nursery Road. So that's where we placed a lot of the trees there to make an impact. And the rest of the trees we really wanted to utilize as buffers for the development adjacent to the Britton Circle development. So you can see we've got a landscape buffer just north of the northwest Phase 1 parking. We want to screen that area as much as possible, even though it is in a distance. And then when Phase 2 comes in line, there will be screening on the north and the east sides of the Phase 2 parking as well to buffer that from the Britton Circle development. And then lastly is an ordinance required 20-foot landscape buffer adjacent to the Britton Circle subdivision development. So the next slide, we're going to actually look at the credits and how the landscape calculations are derived. Okay, so I've highlighted in red the existing tree mass here. And essentially, the ordinance breaks the trees that we can count for credits into two categories, either 3 to 5 inches in size and caliper trunk size diameter, or 6 inches plus in caliper. Now, each of those trees that we save accounts for credits in square footages. So a 3 to 5 inch tree, that credit is 200 square feet. A 6+ inch, that credit is 800 square feet. So the way the math shakes out is that we're keeping 115 3 to 5 inch trees on site, which accounts for 23,000 square feet in landscape credit. And we're keeping 244 6 inch or larger trees, which accounts for 195,200. So the total number of trees that we're keeping is 359, and it gives us 218,000 in landscape credits. So I'll show you how this is a credit slide. We're going to look at the actual calculations now. So for a general development in Stephenville, 15% of the lot is required to be landscaped. So 15% of the lot equates to a square footage for our site. We're able to take, with the credits, we're able to take that 15% square footage, and we're able to reduce the square footage that we derived from the trees that we kept. So taking our 15%, reducing the credits that we saw on the previous slide, the remaining square footage is 62,285. Now, what that means is that 62,000 square feet is required to have landscape material on it. So that's a physical ground plane measurement. What it also means is that trees and smaller trees or shrubs are a component of that. So it's a ratio-based system where for every 1,000 square feet of required landscape area, you're required to have 1 canopy tree or large tree, and then 2 ornamental trees, which are either large screening type shrubs or small trees like crepe myrtles or vitex or smaller flowering type trees. And so what that means for us is that for this site, after we take the tree credits and credit those back to the calculations, we're required to provide 63 new canopy trees and 126 ornamental trees. And so there in red is what we've actually provided on our site through new plantings. So we've provided, in phase 1, we're providing 59 canopy trees. And again, those are the trees that we're doing on the ceremonial drive, and then the trees we're putting just northwest of the parking lot, as well as the landscape buffer. And then we're doing 100 ornamental trees, which, like I said, are like vitex, red buds, wax myrtles, trees like that. In phase 2 is specific to that 239 space parking lot. Again, it's the trees that go on the north and east side. So when that parking lot comes into play, those phase 2 trees and plant material would be required. Next slide. Okay, I wanted to do a zoom in on the Britton Circle landscape buffer just so we were clear on what would be provided there. We talked about the 6-foot tall fence that would be along the property line, and we're extending that buffer 100 feet east of the lot, the last lot there, lot 6 to the east. And what we wanted to do with this landscape buffer, what we're creating is a living screen. So we want to visually screen this as much as possible. There are several existing trees along that property line, cottonwoods and oaks, but we're adding, for our canopy trees, we're adding, it's called an eastern red cedar. That's the leftmost photo there, a very large evergreen plant that will really, visually screen vertically and horizontally. And then we're filling in the smaller symbols that you're seeing there with wax myrtle. That's a really large shrub. It counts as a canopy tree, a non-canopy tree on the city's ordinance. But what we're doing there is that we're spacing them tight enough to where it's going to grow into a solid living screen. So the goal is that visually, yes, you've got the fence, but that plant material in front of it is there to visually screen it, and it's also going to help with some of the noise, just the mass of the plant material. It's all evergreen, so that it's going to continue to have foliage. The intent is that it's a visual buffer, and it's also a buffer from the sound as much as possible there. And then we are providing all of the required plant material that I've showed to you in these preceding slides. Will have a permanent irrigation system, including this buffer here to the back. Okay, we've talked about landscaping, and now we're going to talk about lighting. Here you're seeing 2 different circular color symbols for the site. The orangish yellow symbol is a typical parking lot pole light. They're 25 feet tall. I'll show you an example here in a minute. And then the magenta dot, there's 4 stadium light poles around the corners that will be the primary stadium lighting. So I'll show you some photometrics here on the next slide. What we heard from y'all last time is a concern for what the lighting would do to the Britton Circle development. And so our engineers have ran some photometrics of, with the light casting out from the stadium and the parking lot, on that yellow line, what does that actually look like as we get further out? And what we're seeing there, these measurements are in foot candles. The International Electrical Society says that 1 foot candle is the minimum requirement for pedestrian safety. So if you're walking down a sidewalk or in a plaza, you really need 1 foot candle to visually have safety, to know as you're walking down the sidewalk what you're walking on. So that's context for pedestrian safety. You can see values, you know, from 0.3 all the way down to essentially dark. When the northern parking lot is constructed, they have glare shields that can be placed on the light. Any of the light poles on the northern edge can have a glare shield to where none of the light reflects back. So we feel confident that the Britton Circle development will have minimal to no light effects from this development. The next slide is a typical, it's nothing important, but essentially these fixtures are 25 feet tall, and you saw the spacing in the parking lot let's just say every 80 to 100 feet there's a light pole. Okay, so with this plan development, we have 5 we're calling them code deviations, so items that are not meeting the written ordinance. So there's 5 code deviations I'd like to present for your consideration. And the first one is code deviation 1. We talked about using the junior high parking lot to the south in order to obtain our required parking spaces to meet 1 parking space to every 4 seats. And so there's 468 parking spaces at the junior high. One of the contingencies to using the junior high is that we're going to install 2 signalized pedestrian crossings, and those are the yellow arrows that you're seeing there on the screen. The next slide is going to show us what these signalized pedestrian crossings look like. As you can see here, there will be a striped crosswalk at both of them. There will be curb ramps. It will be fully accessible across the street. When you want to cross at these crossings, there will be the typical push button. When the buttons are pushed, the lights on the signalized flashers will start to flash to notify the motorists to stop. Okay, code deviation 2. We wanted to add a stipulation for when this parking lot would be constructed. At what point would the ISD be required to construct the parking lot? And so there's 2 criterias here for when this would be. There's 2 trigger points. The first trigger point is based upon an average, all of the games averaged together for a season. The second trigger point is based upon what is the peak ticket sales from each of 3 consecutive years. So diving into the first one, again, this is an average of ticket sales across the entire season. When the ticket sales for a 7,700 seat stadium reach 5,395, the district would be required to build the phase 2 parking lot. Now, what does that 395 actually mean? It means that 80% of the parking spaces in the phase 1 development are occupied at that point. So when we reach an 80% capacity with our phase 1 build out over an average of the year, then that would be one criteria. The second criteria underneath, again, is the peak ticket sales from 3 years. When we reach 6,407 tickets sold, then we would be required to build the phase 2. Now that 6,407 equates to a 95% capacity for phase 1. So that means that on the highest ticket sales night of each season, that parking lot is 95% full. So our average is that it's 80% full, but our peak is 95%. And so last year, your peak ticket sales was 5,468. So almost 1,000 ticket sales lower than where you're at today. So those are the two criteria for that code deviation 2. Code deviation 3 is in the landscape ordinance, it requires a tree every 12 spaces in the parking lot. And we're requesting that we still plant the required quantity of trees required by the ordinance, but that because we are constrained with parking on our site, we're constrained by keeping everything south of the channel and west of the floodway, that we need to maximize the parking that we have. And so this deviation means that the trees that we place are outside of parking islands. So you can see the promenade coming in on the ceremonial drive. Those are designated landscape islands anyway, so that's a perfect opportunity for parking lot trees. And then the landscape buffers adjacent to the parking lot are perfect locations for the trees. So again, the deviation is that instead of placing it every 12 spaces, we still plant the trees that would have been required, we just moved them outside of the parking zones. Now the fourth deviation, the ordinance says that the maximum building height for this zoning district is 30 feet. So there's one building that exceeds the 30 feet height, and it is the home press box building. The highest occupiable floor, that's that roof terrace I was showing you about earlier. That's 74 feet 9 inches tall. And the stair tower parapet is 92 feet 1 inches. So this deviation is specifically for the home side building. All of the other 3 buildings fall within our 30-foot requirement. The last code deviation we have to bring before you today is street lighting. We are asking for an exemption from additional street lighting because there is already street lighting provided on West Frey and North Wolf Nursery Road as shown in the yellow dots. As a last component to this, I know we went through those code deviations really quickly, but I wanted to end on the project schedule. We're here on September 20th. We're hoping to come to council next month. Our contractor Crossland is expecting to start mobilization the middle of next month and really get dirt work going the end of October into November. The goal for ultimate project completion is April of 2025. So with that, I want to open the floor up for questions.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions?
Yes. So going back on your parking spot deviations and just your phases and classifications, my first big question is going to be, are these ticket sales to only Stephenville ISD games? I know and understand that the stadium will probably be leased out, rented out to other teams in the area for playoff games, special events. Are we keeping track of those ticket sales as well? You know, a smaller school playoff game can bring more people than a regular Stephenville home game, so that concerns me that we're only worried about Stephenville home games, normal regular season stuff.
I think I think that might be hard to answer.
It is hard to
because
answer.
Because our ticket sales
Yeah.
are probably what they're using, and I'm going to guess here is what they're using is going to be based off of what we've sold in the past, and that has been limited to our sales through Tarleton's
Right.
Stadium. So it would be hard. I understand what you're asking though, 100%, because ideally we will be opening this up for use by other
Yes.
area
a good idea.
for
It's good
playoff
revenue.
games, right, to help cover some costs. So I would just hope that our ISD, our school board, which is really what it will amount to, will make sure that they consider those numbers as well when they're trying to make that decision about whether to go ahead and advance that phase two.
Okay, other
Sure.
questions?
On the ticket sales, is that actual tickets sold or attendance at the games? We know, especially in Stephenville, that can be two completely different numbers on how many tickets are sold to the general public for entrance versus students, boosters, attendees. So that adds a lot more that we're not counting. And the reason I bring this up, I'm just worried about the triggers for the next phases. And I ventured out to a Tarleton game, or the Stephenville game at Tarleton the other night, and it was absolutely madhouse.
You know, I actually
Horrible.
think this sounds like something we need to just bring up in our discussion section, because I don't
Oh,
think
okay.
he has an
Sorry.
answer for that. You know what I mean?
No, no, you're fine.
That's more appropriate after we've had a motion and we can
Understood.
hash that out. So any specific questions about this site?
I have a question about green space.
Okay.
Within the stadium fencing, will there be some green space, like to one side or the other of the stadium
Yes.
seating? We have a long tradition in Stephenville for the elementary school
Go to
kids
the
to
s- the
play a
landscape
pickup
plan
game of
slide,
football,
please.
and I have been asked this question on a number of
Well,
occasions. so-
I have good news because we do have grass that we're providing in the stadium. This slide here, the dark, the bright green is our synthetic field turf. That's the field itself.
Okay,
You can see there's 4 corners of green surrounding that.
Perfect.
That is sod grass, mowed sod grass around those perimeters. Some of it slopes on berms on the southwest and northwest slopes. So we're not going to call it seating, but it is a sloped area. On the east side, because we don't have that 12-foot grade change, it's more flush with the visitors' parking lot.
okay,
But the answer is yes.
okay. Thank you.
Other
The-
questions on the site?
The barrier, the plants that are gonna be planted for the barrier, will y'all be doing any kind of sub-irrigation to help keep those alive during the drought?
Yes, sir. Everything that is provided as a component of this project in terms of trees and turf grass that is around the perimeter, the parking and within the parking will be irrigated. So that landscape buffer against Britton Circle, that will have tree bubblers at each tree.
Awesome.
I got one question.
Yes.
The surface runoff, there's not gonna be any surface runoff in the parking lot itself, it's all gonna go to the detention pond, is that right? Is that what I understood?
Correct. All the runoff from the actual stadium site and parking is going to end up in that detention pond. We have some underground storm sewer systems, but on the southeast side of the stadium, is going to sheet flow into the pond. We're going to have some more Gabion mattress protection for the slopes as it goes into the pond. But yes, all that water is going to be captured and taken into the pond.
And before you step away, I have a question in regards to that pond. I assume there will be some fencing around that area to protect any elementary kids who may stray from.
At the
Their
moment,
path.
I don't believe we have a fence around it, but that's something that we can definitely talk with the ISD, talk amongst ourselves, and incorporate that, as necessary. We are in permit review right now, so if that's a comment from the city that says, hey, you've got to put fence around this, then
As
we'll
the
have
mother
to comply.
of a 10-year-old, very curious 10-year-old boy, I would think that would be a very, very much a necessity, especially given that the Hook Elementary Gilbert Elementary is just on the other side of that. I think that probably would be a really good idea.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, other questions regarding the site?
I've got one for Steve, if that's okay.
Yes.
The 92 feet and 1 inch for the stadium, is that applicable underneath the current zoning, the way it's set up, for them to be able to do that?
Well, the zoning limitation for any zoning district is 35 feet. So that's what they listed as one of their code deviations, is to go to that 92.1.
Okay.
So with it being a planned development, you, as a commission and the city council, can approve that planned development with that deviation or concessions, what I've typically have said in the past. So you're absolutely within the authority of the commission to agree to that 92.4.
Okay, but under the current zone, they'd have to go to Board of Adjustments to get it.
No.
Not, a planned development prevents them from having to go to the Board of Adjustment.
Right.
If this was not a planned development rezone, the only way to get a higher elevation would be, or a height, increased height would be through the Board of Adjustment, correct?
Okay.
I have a question then, a kind of a follow-up to that.
Yeah. Is it something
In regards to
specific?
this height, yeah,
Okay.
do we know why the current height is set at what it's set at?
There's some speculation out there. It was based on a previous fire chief and the equipment that we had at the time. I don't know that that's necessary. I've never heard that directly from the previous fire chief, but our
Do
current
we-
fire chief does not have that concern.
Do we
Fire
have the
safety
equipment?
requirements change at 55 feet in height. And new structures now have what you see as FDC on the front of their buildings, and that's where the engine can connect and it sprinkles through the building. So those concerns have been mitigated as fire science has increased over years.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen, that was very thorough, we appreciate it. I'm gonna go now open a public hearing. If there is anybody who wishes to speak in favor of this rezone request, please come on up to the podium. Is there anybody who wishes to speak against the rezone request? Yeah? And remember, there's a form that you need to fill out for me. You can do it later, but just stating your name. And if you could give me your name, address, and then you'll have 3 minutes.
I'll remember this time. Is there going to be a timer too?
Yes, you'll put up a timer, right?
Hot dog.
3 minutes.
So Laura Gordy, 160 Britton Circle.
There we go.
Okay. So thank you all for being here. It was slightly easier to get here today, but I don't know how you make it here. And I just want to take the first minute. There's not much you can do about this situation, but I want you to remember our family after this. I did everything right when we bought this house. I convinced my husband that we needed to live in the city for protections that the city offers. I looked up the zoning. We thought about the elementary school that might go in our backyard. We went to the elementary school. Did the laughing bother us? No, that was cool. Did the bell schedule bother us? Not really. Never in a million years did I think a stadium would be in our backyard, a mile from another stadium. And as I sat rocking my 10-month-old at the last game, and I heard the stadium from inside of my house, the Tarleton Stadium, I don't know how I got my family in this financial situation. Because when I talk to realtors, my house is now at least $20,000, maybe $50,000 worth less, and I have limited my buyer pool. Because I can't, I gotta move. I got a kiddo with special needs, light and sound. It's not his thing, so we gotta move. Remember our family when somebody asks you for an exception, please. Thank you so much for including the landscape buffer. It's seen best on page 21. I'm wondering if we can, right now, some of the trees are involved in phase 2. I'm wondering if it's at all possible to use those trees to go along the back side of the stadium. To see where it ends on that. So it says landscape buffer on the parking lot and it goes around. Could we make the trees go all the way around the stadium? So we essentially have 2 rows of buffer in there. So that's a request. If there's any way we could bring those trees from phase 2 back into phase 1. You answered the irrigation, sound and light nuisances. I'd like to know how we ensure that we can put those light covers. We learned from Stephenville ISD about light pollution, and my special kiddo thinks it's really interesting. He's very concerned about light pollution, and I said I would ask. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Somebody else who would like to speak? Yes, ma'am. Please come to the podium and give us your name and your address, and you'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Jean Stokes. I also live on Britton Circle, 180. Britton Circle is my home. And I appreciate what you all are doing and everything that has been said in our behalf. I'm an English teacher, and I know Robert Frost in The Mending Wall talked about good fences make good neighbors. But there are 2 speakers in that poem. One of them warns that we should know what we're walling in and what we're walling out when we build a fence, when we build a wall. But this time, I think we want to make sure that people do not park on Britton Circle and try to access. You've talked about a fence. We appreciate that. But please, no gates in that fence where people could park on Britton Circle and then access the stadium. I'll enjoy the stadium. I'll watch my grandkids play ball there. But the other thing I heard talked about tonight was the cedar trees. Please do not plant cedar. Half of this town goes to the doctor because we are allergic to cedar trees. Something else, please. Thank you all.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Does anybody else wish to speak? Can we get her a microphone? Is there any way to?
I think you can hear me.
Let's speak very loud, and please give us your name and address.
Mickey Lance, I live at 111 Britain Circle. And as I spoke of the last time we were together, my concern is the flooding. I see on the picture up here, the track that goes behind the first parking area that's to the top of the picture, being several straight lines that go to the square, right? Now, is that runoff from the homes on the far side of 377 Loop?
So we're talking about that purple line that's going down? That's
No.
what's coming out of there.
Now, see,
And so what is your concern? Are you afraid about?
well, the gentleman talked about runoff from the other points
Mhm.
that come underneath 377 there. They come along the drainway, which includes the pond. It's already there. I don't see that pond. on
No,
this
they're
map.
creating the pond.
Yeah, they are further down, but what happens to the
Oh.
pond that's already there? And when they get down to
Oh,
that
okay.
area.
So that is off this site?
Yeah.
Okay.
So they've shown the water coming from across 377. They don't show the water that's coming from my side, the high school bus barn side of the road.
Okay. Okay.
So.
Concern about, okay, so your concern is that water would
Would-
somehow flow differently?
Yeah, but
Okay.
it would collect in a greater amount, I think, than is possibly shown.
Okay. So your concern is that?
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Anything else?
Well, I'm sure I could think of something.
Thank you. Would anybody else wish to speak? All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. I appreciate y'all coming and giving us all of this feedback. Yeah, Mr. King, I know you're here tonight. Do you have anything that you'd like to add regarding any of this?
I don't think at this point, maybe depending on how y'all's discussion goes.
All righty, thank you, sir. Okay, I think we have a lot of important feedback. I think our citizens have given our developers things to think about going forward. Commissioners, we need a motion so that we can discuss.
I move to approve.
Is there a second? Okay. Thoughts, concerns?
The
Well-
phasing dates. I mean, that's really, and
Your
Steve, I
question,
don't,
yeah.
I don't know if the legalities of it as well, because in our planning ordinance, planning and zoning ordinance, it specifically states an approximate date will be given. for them to, involved in the development schedule. You know, ticket sales have nothing to do with a date. So that's my big question as far as, you know, just reading through development, planning and zoning ordinance, is that it's kind of hard to place a date on, you know, I asked a lot of questions, sorry I asked them in the wrong spot, but, you know, there's so much to be considered on what involves a ticket sale. You know, I'm all for, you know, renting it out to everybody in the next 5 counties that want to have a playoff game, shoot, yeah. But that's slightly concerning on, we have a game with 7,000 people show up this, you know, the first playoff season. Well, that was only one peak, so it has to peak for 3 years. You know, where is that going to give us problems for that one having less parking?
Well,
I'm not sure that your question was ever answered either with regard to, are those games included?
And she had a good point on, well, we don't really know, we've never done it yet, so that's a good one,
I don't know
is
that
it going to be
was ever sufficiently
completely
answered by someone who
included?
represents the project.
Absolutely.
right, and also in that same discussion, during the development of the stadium and everything, they've already got the numbers, so it was an easy question to know how much are in attendance now versus the future attendance that they're projecting. So it would be a good answer to hear. And I'd also like to know how many were at the homecoming game this last week, because
Yeah. it was-
everybody that went knew that parking was an issue. I did ask to get a number from Tarleton on what their parking situation's like right now, and they've got 1,700 available right now. We're looking at 1,925 when phase 2's implemented. And we're already scrambling for parking now. And so that's a major concern I've got.
And and I'm sorry to interrupt you, is that phase 2 parking lot going to ease the constraints of a major game anyways?
My question to you, all three of you, would be, so what would your solution be to force them to go ahead and build phase 2 right now as part of phase 1? I mean, whether they build it as part of phase 2 or part of phase 1, if they complete phase 1 and we immediately see we have a problem, I would think that the board of directors, the school board, would go ahead and go, clearly we need to go ahead and implement phase 2.
Okay, so what we need to do, I mean, we can't speculate on what they
Right.
should or shouldn't do at this
Right,
point.
but also we
just
can't
need to-
speculate on numbers we don't have.
Right, so what we need to do is rein that in and make a decision on what we have before us.
Okay, so this was also going to be, well, let's see, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. So the parking for phase 2 was one of the requests that they had for us. What if we
As a
go-
deviation.
As a deviation.
Uh-huh.
I go ahead and would like to make a supplement to the main motion that we go ahead and include phase 2 as being part of the main project now.
Okay, so you
I
want
don't
to
think
make
we
a
can
motion, and so you need a second for
Make
that to go
an
through.
amendment to the main,
You would need to vote against the PD as presented.
okay.
This is, they're presenting their plan based on what they need to make the plan work.
So we
Okay.
cannot make an amendment.
So, I don't.
It'd be an amendment to the main motion.
Well, no, he's saying we just need to simply
Yeah.
approve or deny,
Okay.
Yeah.
as is. Okay, so the motion currently stands to approve as is or to deny. Do we have any discussion that is
We
relevant
haven't,
to
I
that?
I haven't seen a second on that motion, on
Well,
this motion to add the supplement.
No, he's saying we cannot add a supplement.
Yeah. Okay.
Because this is a PD.
Okay,
Yes, we simply can approve or deny.
so he withdraws that motion to add the
it just
supplement.
dies.
Make a recommendation.
So.
And I'll do did we ever get a second on your
We
motion?
did, yes.
Okay.
You did second that. Okay. Okay, shall we vote, or is there more that you want to hash out? Mr. King,
I think I would like to weigh in now.
come on.
and I hear y'all's concerns on the parking. We've had extensive discussions, both with the engineers, superintendent and I talk all the time. I don't know about tournament games.
Yeah,
I have no
but-
idea. My guess would be that they try not to sell more tickets than they fit people in, because it wouldn't do anybody any good to show up. I mean,
Right.
So I'm sure that's something that operationally,
I'm a taxpayer too. The more they can pay in my school, I'd bring them in, but, you know,
Right.
just concerns, Mr. King.
so from the beginning, in some of us are the ones that worked with them and suggested staging the parking to try to make the project flow from a financial standpoint and all those things. So again, we're not seeing any big issues with the way that it's staged right now. And I guess I know another way to say that.
Okay. Thank you, sir. All right, commissioners, are we ready to vote? Do we need to?
I do have a question. Assuming they build phase 1 and phase 2, with the completion of phase 2, that will be the necessary parking for the full seating for the stadium, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
one
that
way or
300
another, we
spaces is
will,
all-
ultimately, we will get full parking for the stadium.
Yes.
Okay.
So Tarleton students, they take away from a lot of parking already too. So that's-
Over at Tarleton.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And I would imagine
Yeah.
that football players, like, and band, would probably park at the high school
be
because that's
bussed
where they're
over.
going to be getting ready. So,
Yeah.
The reason I stated one thing on that is they had half the parking lot for boosters that were all empty, and we're all jumping curbs trying to park in construction zones.
The week before that, they cornered off the whole section just for the buses too.
Right.
Mr. King, wait.
And I do think that's important to remember is that we currently don't have access where we're playing today to the number of parking spots that we're
Absolutely.
talking about.
Right.
and we
And
also
so-
don't have bus parking, and
Right.
that is something that is provided there at the stadium.
I did like that.
I
Full-
also
full
was
bus.
there Friday night.
They could also
Just
take
getting
buses
there
back
was
to-
an adventure.
It
with
was an
all
adventure.
Our construction and those things. So, yeah, I think this is gonna be a vast improvement, even just on stage 1, on inflow and how all that's gonna.
Actually having corridors to follow.
All right, let's get to a vote. Commissioners, the current motion stands to recommend to council approval of this plan development. Let's go roll call. Aye? Justin? Mary?
Aye.
I'm aye. Brian's a no?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, so the recommendation to council is to approve this plan development. So gentlemen, your next stop is city council, first Tuesday of next month.
Madam Chair, if I may, just want to make a quick correction on that. The October council meeting was delayed until October 10th.
Excuse me.
And so wanted to point that out to Ben and Landon as well. October 3rd is no longer the date. It will be October 10th for the next city council meeting.
Thank you. And citizens who've come in, appreciate your vote, your words. Please come to that city council meeting. They are the ones who are making the final decision on this, and they need to hear your concerns. Thank you. Okay, we are going to move up to the next item on our agenda. Please don't feel like you have to stick around unless you find this fascinating, which it is. I know. But we won't cry if you guys go get dinner. All right, next item, case number SV 2023-001. Applicant Emmanuel Blockson, representing Retirement Living for Seniors, is requesting a subdivision waiver from section 155.6.11 sidewalk requirements to be constructed at West Lingoville Road, parcel R77868, being acres 7.664, A0520, Menifree Jarrett of the city of Stephenville, Erath County, Texas. Steve.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioners, so Mr. Deloxon is building, he has a R3 multifamily project out on the Lingoville Highway. This is going to be for the senior living. that you guys heard several months back. He has been working very closely with staff on his submittals. We are to the point now that we have the text dot approval. We're working through the civil plan set. He's hoping to get started on this in the very near future. He is asking for a sidewalk waiver. If you look at the staff report, the area highlighted in green is actually his property. That property only has 60 foot of frontage on Lincolnville Highway. He will have roughly a 24-foot wide approach for fire access. So he's asking not to install sidewalk along the remainder of that Highway 8 frontage. Staff is recommending that this be denied based on our Chapter 155 requirement. Also, we would like to point out that although the assisted living facility next door does not have a sidewalk, they do have a paved access point. And then from there, it's just a short distance to the Dollar General. We speculate that this population will need to maybe walk down to that facility for groceries and different needs. And so we would oppose the request for the sidewalk waiver. Again, we're only talking about a 60-foot frontage, but we believe the residents there may need that access. So with that, be glad to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for Steve? Is Mr. Glockson here tonight?
Mr. Bloxon is not here tonight.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and open a public hearing. Is there anybody here who wishes to speak in favor of this request? Anybody who wishes to speak against? I'll close the public hearing. Commissioners, I need a motion.
I move to deny SV 2023-001.
Recommendation to
Second.
deny?
Yes.
Second, Mary?
Second.
I'm in agreement. I don't see much need for discussion. Do anybody? No? Okay, all those in favor of recommending to council denial of this subdivision waiver, say aye. Those opposed? Okay, Justin. Justin is a nay. Thank you, sir. All right, moving on. Case number SV 2023-002, applicant Emmanuel Glockson, representing Retirement Living for Seniors, is requesting a subdivision waiver from section 155.6.04, curb and gutter requirements to be constructed at West Lincolnville Road, parcel R77868, being acres 7.664 A0520, Menifree Jarrett of the city of Stephenville, Erath County, Texas. Steve.
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair, this is the same property, same situation, with one exception. Generally, we, as staff, are programmed to recommend that you deny a waiver request, and that's what we have in this report. However, this is on a text dot right-of-way, and we have consulted with text dot, and we have also met with our public works staff. City staff support this waiver request, and text dot actually, because they don't know exactly where the right-of-way will fall on future projects, they have indicated that they don't really have a great desire to have curb and gutter installed along their state right-of-ways. With that, I'm glad to answer any questions.
Would it just be curb and gutter right there for that 60 feet?
Yes, sir.
And then everything else would just be?
That's it. Only, this waiver is only for the 60 feet.
Yeah, okay.
And that's
Thank you, sir.
property line too, right? Property line only?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
All right, commissioners, well, no, let's go ahead and open a public hearing. Is there anybody here who wishes to speak in favor of this request? Anybody who wishes to speak against? Closing the public hearing. Commissioners, I need a motion.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Do we need to discuss? All those in favor of recommending to council approval of this waiver, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? All right. Case number FP 2023-003, applicant Emmanuel Glockson, representing Retirement Living for Seniors LTD, is requesting approval of a final plat of property located at 0W Lincolnville Road, parcel R77868 of acres 7.664 A0520, Menifree Jarrett of the city of Stephenville, Erath County, Texas. Steve.
Yes, ma'am, Madam Chair. Again, Mr. Glockson, same property. He is really approaching the time of where he can get started on this project after extensive delays. He is wanting to try to get this going as quickly as possible. In the ordinance, we allow you to start public improvements, but you can also get your building permit if you agree to an escrow agreement and provide funding for those public improvements if they're not completed within a certain time period. So Mr. Glockson is asking, he's working with staff currently to get that wrapped up. His final plat has been reviewed by staff. We have no conditions on the plat other than we need that escrow agreement to be executed. Once that's executed, the final plat, according to or staff's opinion, would be ready for recordation by the county.
Thank you. Any questions for Steve?
What public improvements is he having to do as a part of this?
Some drainage.
Okay.
And he's also got a water line extension, I believe. So public improvements, they are also asking that he provide on-site detention in connection to that escrow agreement, along with access to an access road to the construction site. So all that's in the works. We're
Okay.
really close on finalizing that, but he needs the final plat to move forward with the building permit.
So can we approve this with,
Condition.
with the condition that he meet that escrow?
Yes, ma'am. The one condition would be that the escrow agreement be executed.
So I would so move.
Okay, do we
Or
need to
can
do a
I-
public hearing?
Oh.
For plats?
Well, yeah, that's a different animal, isn't it?
It is.
I think historically we have, but it does not have to go to to
It
city
doesn't,
council.
right, well, we'll do it anyways, because there's so many people here. Go ahead and open a public hearing. Anybody wish to have a comment? Closing the public hearing. Commissioners, Mary,
I move that we approve with the condition as stated by Steve.
Second.
all those in favor of approving this plat with the stated condition, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those against? All right, that is approved. Case number 6 on our item has been pulled on our agenda, so we will skip right over that and go to number 7. Applicant Mark Pace, representing Brown Pace Development Company LLC, is requesting approval of a final plat for property known as Garrett CT Parcel R33513, 26200, South Side Edition, Block 7, Lot 7 and 8 of the City of Stephenville, Erath County, Texas. Steve.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We stretch back maybe 2 years, you might remember a preliminary plat that was presented by Mr. Mark Pace. He has started that project and actually constructed 9 units of that project at this point. He's wanting to finish that in phases now, but he still conforms to the preliminary plat. So that's authorized by ordinance. He's asking for a final plat for phase 1. This has been reviewed by staff. We are agreeable to phasing this project. We are asking that the plat be approved with the following conditions. One, that he provide proof of ownership, because it's been a couple of years since we reviewed that. That the homeowners association be formed and that the documents be reviewed and approved by our city attorney, and that he pays all fees related to phase 1. And with that, Madam Chair, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for Steve? All right, I'll go ahead and open a public hearing. Is there anybody here who wishes to speak in favor or against this final plat? Closing the public hearing. Commissioners.
I move to approve FP 2023-004 with staff conditions.
Second?
All those in favor of approving this plat with noted conditions, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Those against? We're done. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you, thank you.